It's life, or life imitates art. So both can be accurate. And what these are some of your literary and cultural icons of this era of great change. Okay? So, just like in literature, an older era seemed to have ground to a halt with the end of World War One. And by the dawn of the 1920s, that old genteel culture of the old ways had kind of died and is replaced by this new American culture, this 1920s flapper girl, prohibition, sneaking around it culture. Because honestly, our entire civilization of Americans were criminals. Everybody was a criminal. If you had a drink, you were a criminal, and most people were drinking. So, um, these are some people who kind of shine a light on some of the cultural changes that are occurring through the power of their literature and through the power of their talent. Does anyone know who this gentleman is? Can you see my arrow pointer? Top left. That guy. That is F. Scott Fitzgerald. What did he do? Yeah, he wrote The Great Gatsby. And, at the time he wrote it, he was like 24 years old. Maybe less than 30 for sure. The Great Gatsby, he wrote it in 1925. It's a brilliant commentary on the illusory American ideal of the self-made man, the new money, who ultimately is destroyed by the power of those with wealth and social standing, as I'm sure that you guys have read in your book, right? When you read the book. All right, what about this gentleman here? It's just, he's a very friendly, grandfatherly-looking character with a nice beard. I thought everyone on planet Earth knew who that was. It's Ernest Hemingway. Ever heard of him? Old Man and the Sea. Have you ever heard of this book?
Yes.
Okay, good. Ernest Hemingway, who's also a World War I veteran who had seen action on the Italian front in 1917, he was very affected by the war. And he responded to the propaganda and the overblown patriotism by devising his own style of literature. And in many of his works of literature, like The Sun Also Rises, A Farewell to Arms. Interesting character, very interesting character. Combine like the worst parts of Edgar Allan Poe with like the best part, with creative writing, and also like a pushback against American patriotism. And you get Ernest Hemingway. All right. This guy with the cool hair, Ezra Pound. Ezra Pound is a poet. Brilliantly erratic Idahoan. He's from Idaho. Probably the only person from Idaho we'll talk about this year. He deserted America for Europe and rejected what he called an old witch civilization, only he didn't say witch. An old witch civilization gone in the teeth. And he very much was a counter-culturalist who did not like the direction America was going, so he left. All right, anybody know who this is? T.S. Eliot, ever heard of that name? He's heavily influenced by Ezra Pound. Born in Missouri, educated at Harvard, he produced one of the most some very influential poems of the day, and all these guys are contemporary with one another, so they're all having influence on another. And you definitely have heard of this of William Faulkner. William Faulkner. William Faulkner and Robert Frost. You ever heard Robert Frost? The Road Less Traveled. That was all these guys are writing at the same period of time. Okay, and the new music of the day. What was the new style of music that was very popular amongst the flapper girls? Jazz. And Louis Armstrong was probably one of the. He contributed the most to the Harlem Renaissance and his creative expression, and argues for full citizenship for Negroes as well as social equality, something that many African Americans still striving for today. Okay, so just as you know, literature definitely reflects the sign of the times. Okay, so these past days, we've been talking about the culture of the 1920s. Now let's look more at the government, like how our government is functioning in this time period, as it is a time of great prosperity. So things are good. So you would imagine, would the government need to really do much when things are good? Not really, and they don't. In fact, they do. This is a period of some of the lightest government interaction in people's lives in American history. And that style of leadership is called laissez-faire. It's a French word that means hands off. Hands off. There were 3 Republican presidents in this time period: Warren G. Harding, Calvin Coolidge, and Herbert Hoover. They steered the nation on the roller coaster ride that was the 1920s, which saw America rise in a thrilling ascent from the depths of World War I to a height of prosperity never before seen in human history, followed by a terrifying crash that brought America and the globe into crumbling shambles with the Great Depression. All of that happens during the period of these 3 Republican presidents: Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover. All right. So this old Republican guard, Warren G. Harding, we'll start with him. He was inaugurated. He became president in 1921. Looks very presidential. Very erect posture, broad shoulders, high forehead, bushy eyebrows, gray hair, and an extremely likable guy. He doesn't look very approachable. Super nice guy, very friendly, great smile when he smiled, easygoing, warm-handed back slapper. Like, hey, buddy, slap you on the back. All right? So you would like Warren G. Harding on a personal level. Friendly guy. He exuded graciousness. His love of people showed in his personality and the way he treated people. And he was so kindly in his nature that he would brush off ants from his picnic blanket rather than crush them. Just a kind man. Just a kind man. Yet with his charm and his smooth exterior kind of concealed a weak, somewhat incompetent, inept, mediocre interior. He's not brilliant. He's not dumb. He's mediocre. All right? And Harding quickly found himself well beyond his depth when it comes to the presidency. Harding, much like Ulysses S. Grant, was unable to detect moral problems amongst his evil associates. Remember what happened during U.S. Grant's administration? Lots of scandal and corruption. So he was soon surrounded by his buddies called the Ohio Gang. because he's from Ohio, and his buddies were part of the Ohio gang. Now, he just saw them as his buddies. They come over to the White House, they play poker, they drink illegal booze. It's during Prohibition. There was booze in the White House. And Harding was just kind of one of the boys, and he hated to hurt people's feelings. He was a people pleaser. Hated to hurt people's feelings, especially those of his friends. And so by saying no, he saw that as, rude and mean. And he didn't want to be rude and mean to his buds. So his buds, being political leeches, capitalized on that and really just kind of overran the president to get whatever they wanted. And it worked. Okay, so, and he's not a very smart guy to start with, so he couldn't even detect it when they were doing things that were wrong and illegal. So, this old guard hoped to improve on the business of laissez-faire, meaning what kind of role is government going to have on the economy and in business? None. Zero. Government needs to keep its hands off business. But for government to help guide business along the path to profits, that's what they wanted to see government do. Help the business make more money, not put restrictions on them. So they subtly and effectively achieved their ends by putting the courts and administrative bureaus into kind of bad standing, unable to have any teeth when it comes to enforcing business laws. So I'll give you some examples of what they did. In the first years of Harding's administration, there was a federal child labor law. Kids aren't allowed to go work in factories. Stripped it away. Well, how's that good for business? How's that good for business? Kids can go to work, and how's that good for business? Kids can do the same job as an adult, but you can pay them half as much. That's good for business. They get the same production out of a worker, and they only have to pay them half as much. That's good for business. Is that good for America? No. There was other things like women being given special protections in the workplace or a minimum wage for women. Those things got stripped away. So bad for workers, good for business. Bad for workers, good for business. Because there was no government protections to protect the working man. Okay? All right, so all the while he's taking over for Woodrow Wilson, who had a stroke, and he wins the election. Woodrow Wilson was a Democrat. Orange Harding and all the presidents of the 1920s were Republicans. And so we're in the following years after the war. And how many soldiers did we send overseas? 3 million. And of those 3 million, about 2 million saw combat. So we're going to have a large number of what? What are people that see combat called? Veterans. We have a large number of veterans. So needy veterans were among the few non-business groups to get some lasting gains. And as in 1921, Congress generously created the Veterans Bureau, which authorized hospitals, vocational rehabilitation for people who were disabled. Today it's the VA. You ever heard of the VA? That's the then here it was the VB, Veterans Bureau. Now it's the VA, Veterans Administration. But it was created out of World War I. Veterans quickly organized into pressure groups or interest groups. They band together to form a common interest to get what they want in government, like a lobbyist. And one of the groups it forms is called the American Legion. Ever hear of it? It's a veterans organization. The American Legion was actually founded in Paris in 1919 by Colonel Theodore Roosevelt Jr., Teddy Roosevelt's son, who was a World War I veteran. He saw combat. Where they get together and they renew old hardships, let off steam, have some good-natured horseplay, play cards, talk, just share war stories, literally. The American Legion also became notorious for its aggressive lobbying of veterans' benefits. Wanted to see more benefits for veterans. And the chief grievance was more money. The doughboys want more dough. They want their dough. So they demanded veterans, the American Legion lobbied for better pay, adjusted compensation is what they called it. They see all these businesses making wild profits, and while veterans are home, to a large degree disabled, unable to work, homeless, and they want to see some assistance for those people that laid down their lives and their bodies for their country to make up for the wages that they had lost. And even if you came back unhurt, you were gone for several years maybe. And those were wages that you lost what you could have been working in a factory or on your farm. And so they wanted adjusted compensation for that. When they turned in their factory overalls for military uniforms, they wanted to be paid. Okay? So what this is essentially because they were paid as soldiers, they got paid while they were fighting. They wanted bonus pay because they said, yeah, we got paid as soldiers, but the factory, we could have made a lot more in the factory. Could have been working on our own farms, making our own money, and we want a bonus because we volunteered and went to help. So millions of veterans deployed a lot of political artillery. They browbeat Congress into passing a bill. It's called the Bonus Bill of 1922. Which Harding vetoes. They were going to give the soldiers a bonus. Harding vetoes it. Then they reformed their lines, and the veterans gathered for a final attack. And in 1924, Congress again hoisted the white flag and allows for the veterans to get their bonus with the Adjusted Compensation Act. Now, the Adjusted Compensation Act is a little different than the first bill they passed. This is what the Adjusted Compensation Act does. It gave every former soldier an insurance policy that would pay them in 20 years. So if you can make it 20 years, you get paid. You get your bonus. This is in 1924. So when's it supposed to pay out? When? 1944. What happens in 1929? Great Depression. Veterans are particularly hard hit. So you're going to see that they want their bonus a little bit sooner. And so you'll see some things that happen as a result of this Adjusted Compensation Act. So keep that in mind as we get into the 1930s. All right? Even the Adjusted Compensation Act was actually vetoed by Calvin Coolidge in 1924, but Congress overrode him. So it did pass, okay? Leaving the veterans with their future loot, if they can make it. All right. So just like in Grant's administration, there's going to be scandal. Just simply because Harding's unable to see it, or in this case, smell it. So the loose morality and the get-rich-quickism of the Harding era manifested themselves in a spectacular series of scandals. Not just one or two, a bunch. One man named Colonel Charles Forbes, who was a one-time member of the United States Army, he and his accomplices looted the government for about $200 million. $200 million. This is 1920s money. You know where he's getting it from? They passed the new Veterans Bureau. They were going to start building hospitals. He just stole the money that was meant to be building hospitals. What a good guy. What a good guy. Let's steal money from the veterans, people who have lost their limbs and need hospitals, and just pocket it. He got caught. You know what his punishment was? 2 years in prison. $200 million, 2 years in prison. That's one scandal. The most shocking of the scandals was called the Teapot Dome scandal. Teapot Dome. You see the teapot here. You see steamroller. You see people running from it. This is an affair that involved priceless oil reserves in a place called Teapot Dome, Wyoming. That's the name of the place. Teapot Dome. It's a place in America. It's in Wyoming. And also in Elk Hills, California. Oil reserves. And the oil reserves were owned by the United States Navy. And in 1921, the Secretary of Interior, Albert B. Fall, and the Secretary of the Navy, they decide that they're going to transfer these properties to the Department of the Interior, or the Interior Department. So it's just a transfer of deed from the U.S. Navy to the Department of the Interior. Fall, being one of the Ohio gang, one of Harding's buddies, he just simply brings the paperwork to the president. He's like, hey, you want to play cards next time? Hey, sign this. And Harding's like, yeah, sure, yeah, we'll play cards. And he signs it and hands it to him. He's just a good old boy. I mean, he just signed something the guy handed him. So then Fall takes the signed documents and quickly leased the lands to oil companies like Harry Sinclair. You ever seen like the Sinclair oil with the dinosaur? It used to be a pretty popular petroleum company. But in return for this, he gets, they're going to give him some money because they're basically handing him over millions and millions of dollars worth of oil. And so he just takes a bribe, like, hey, here's $100,000. Thanks for helping us out. And that happens about, 3 or 4 times. So the Department of Interior's, Albert B. Fall is making loads of money doing, with exchanging property into hands that it shouldn't be going to. So obviously this gets found out that that people in the United States government are favoring business over the United States military, all right, and are making money over it. So this puts a very oily smudge on the polluted prestige of our Washington White House. And very right-thinking citizens wondered what was going on when public officials are willing to sell out our nation's vital resources, especially those that were reserved for the United States Navy, to people like oil companies just trying to make a quick profit. That's not even the end of the scandals. Other scandals, like the Attorney General of the United States was like selling illegal pardons for people convicted on booze. People like he was handing out liquor permits. Like you could have liquor if you had a permit from the government. He was selling them to make money for himself, okay? So he's forced to resign. All these guys are just Harding's buddies, and they were trying to make money for themselves using their power and authority. Harding was just simply not strong enough a man for the presidency. He just wasn't strong enough of a man. And such a weakness that, it ultimately, it hurts him, and he dies in office He dies in office. He dies of a heart attack while he's in San Francisco. And his vice president, Calvin Coolidge, becomes president. And we'll talk about Silent Cal next time.